Welcome to the big questions of 2023 from the Rossmoor Interfaith Council. Today we get to hear from Mariu Arzayus and Reverend Kristin Powell. And here is Sarah Blackstock.
Hello, y'all, and welcome to the 2023 Big Question Forum. As you know, the big question of this year is humankind good or selfish? Thank you to the Interfaith Council of Rossmoor and to the Big Questions Committee, Ruth Aherns, Sunshine, Gloria Sunshine, and Channing Miller. We much appreciate Will McGarvey, Executive Director of the Contra Costa County Interfaith Council, who generously has been hosting us for the last few years. And also thank you to Rossmoor Channel 28 for recording this session. Gratitude to the folks at Rossmoor News who published the articles on the big questions. Takes a village. So is humankind good or selfish? How, what, where, why, when, who? Very few questions have definitive answers. The answers may come as a process, an evolving, dynamic process that will not be tied down or boxed in. What the questions do is to offer a platform, a space. It's a space for sharing, for hearing the opinions and beliefs of others, a space for thinking about. Many people believe that there are definitive answers, and they believe theirs are the right and only ones. Others are interested in the exploration of the big questions. They want the depth and width of the possible answers to the questions. They are involved in the process of discovering answers, which may lead to a greater understanding of themselves and their place in the universe. Some want to dance on theoretical postulations. My husband had a question about that statement, but I liked it, so I was going to keep it in. Others want to establish a more personal interface with possible answers. They desire a personal understanding of how they fit into the universe. When we have a platform on which we lay out our questions and hear what others have to share about their experiences, perhaps we find a perfect puzzle piece which fits into our own evolving, exploring philosophical process. Our first speaker is Mariu Arzayus, representing Eckankar. Mariu Arzayus has been a member of Eckankar for 38 years, now holding the trusted position of an Eckankar cleric. She is Colombian and a world traveler who has lived in several countries. She was a truth seeker until she found Eckankar, where she found the truth she was looking for. She studied psychology at Colombian University and continues to be a lifelong learner. She facilitates personal and spiritual development workshops for people who want to continue growing spiritually. Mariu supports the ECK Club, Eckankar Club in Rossmoor, which shares spiritual principles for everyday joy and living, and meets twice a month. Details are in the Rossmoor newspaper on the religion spiritual page. She has been living happily in Rossmoor for the last 2 years, engaging in various clubs and activities, including being a member of the Rossmoor Interfaith Council. So I would like to welcome Mariu.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here with you. I have listened with attention to the people who have spoken before me, and I have also seen the sincerity of the people who come to this forum in looking for truth. And I trust that whatever I am going to share with you today will add to your life, to the love of life and the love of the divine. I really like what Sarah said about being relevant. And what she also told me was, Mariu, speak slowly because you have an accent. So I will try to do my best, okay? I'm going to be using a PowerPoint, which let me open the screen. There we are. Let's see how this goes. Okay. Now, my perspective includes reincarnation. And I am not trying to convince anybody here that reincarnation is true or not, because such exploration is very personal. So it's up to each of us. So let's continue to the next slide. Okay. Now let me see. I am inviting you right now to go on a journey with me so that I can share with you what I ponder and contemplating about to come up with the answer that I'm going to be giving at the end. So what I have to say is that the answer that I heard in the big point previously, I thought they were very good. However, they only consider one life. And my question is, can we learn it all in one life? How can we learn about love and atone for harm to others? And what if we live more than once and perhaps many times? What if God designed karma and reincarnation as essential parts of the big plan? I was brought up as a Catholic, and in my religious studies, nobody mentioned reincarnation or karma. There was only the mention of whatever you sow, so you shall reap, and that was about it. As I continued in life, I was, and I am very curious to find about truth of things. So eventually I came up with the concept of karma and reincarnation. I read books and I began to have experiences that convinced me that for me, reincarnation is something very true, because it gives you more of a balanced idea of why there is evil in the world, why is there suffering, and why there is such disparities. And I have had personal experiences that took me to past lives that I have had. Now, exploring about karma and reincarnation, I did a little exploration, and Wikipedia thinks that it is a common belief in Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, and Jainism, and also some Jewish people believe in reincarnation. The Pew Research, which is very famous, did a research and found that 1/3 of Americans, or 34, believe in reincarnation. And this long title that you can all read here, you know, important bodies that do research. They did a research where more than 1,800 people in 23 countries participated, and they found that 51% of the people believe in reincarnation. So it's not as if reincarnation is a New Age belief that somebody come up with it, but it's in fact something that humanity has believed for hundreds and thousands of years. Now we come to the question that we are trying to find the answer to today. Are people good or selfish? And what about reincarnation? So what I have found in my life experience is that we are souls with physical bodies, that God created us with love, that as souls we are immortal sparks of God, that we have come to earth many times to learn from life experiences, and through these experiences we learn how to give and receive divine love, and when we are connected thus to the divine, we are able to share that love. Today, I will be sharing some quotes from Harold Klemp. Harold Klemp is a living teacher. He is the spiritual leader of Eckankar, and he's my spiritual guide. And what Harold here, Sri Harold is saying, that we are soul, that the identity behind your name, behind your physical form, behind the comeliness of your face, you are made in God's image. It is an image of divine love. Okay. I'm trying to pass the next. Okay, so are people good or bad? My answer is very simple, and the concept of good or bad does not apply, because I believe that we are growing souls. Life is a continuous spiritual process. Each of us is in a different stage of development. And if we are here climbing the mountain of God, learning about love and how to go back to the heart of God, then we are walking our own path to God. And there is always somebody ahead of us and somebody behind us. And Harold Klemp tells us that what we are about is walking our own path to God. He says, your path is not my path, and my path is not yours. God made you a unique being. You are soul. So what is the relationship between karma and reincarnation? One may ask. What I have found is that actually they go hand in hand. They complement each other. Karma teaches us, and reincarnation gives us more life opportunities to learn and grow. And when we begin to understand this, we stop seeing ourselves as victims. I have found it to be very empowering. And I'm going to share with you an experience where I understood about karmic loops and I gained spiritual freedom. I was 6 when my mom died in Colombia. And my father, he remarried. And I found myself in a home, in a place where my father married Cinderella's stepmother. And not only was the stepmother, but her mother. And we lived with them, and they were mean people. And I found that for many years, they were very abusive of me. So that created lots of emotional and psychological problems for me. I was left with no self-esteem. And through life, in my emotional and psychological difficulties, I blamed them. In fact, I hated them. So when I came across this thing about karma and reincarnation, I understood that if I kept hating them, then in the next life, I will find them again, and I will be in a similar situation to that I endured. So my immediate answer was, no way. I want to go through that. And from that moment on, I began to forgive them. It took quite a while, but I forgave them. And that also gave me spiritual freedom. So, what is this about spiritual freedom? Spiritual freedom, I learned, you know, here on earth, we are all kinds. But I found that spiritual freedom is the greatest of all, and it's fundamental in spiritual growth. We gain spiritual freedom through the purification of our emotions and mind, and through the joys and trials of life. And Harold Clem tells us here that when you gain spiritual freedom, we are living our full potential, heart, mind, and soul, and that divine love leads us directly to spiritual freedom, and that the entire aim of life is to find that freedom. Right, spiritual laws of life and spiritual tools. As I went on my spiritual quest, I learned about the spiritual laws of life, which is like, this is how life works. And I learned about the spiritual tools. And so in our journey through life, I think we need to learn about this, about the spiritual laws and gain spiritual tools. Some spiritual laws, most of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with the law of gratitude. There is the law of karma and reincarnation, the law of silence. So in my life, the more I learned about this and the more I applied and respected and followed these laws, the more I could avoid pitfalls and therefore create less karma. The other thing that is important in spiritual life is that the Holy Spirit is trying to communicate with us all the time through dreams, through things that happen in life. And it doesn't matter what religion we are, because basically we are souls, God loves us, and Divine Spirit loves us. So we are all of it. So I like to tell you about an experience I had before I found this home in Rossmoor. In August of 1921, I was looking for a home in Rossmoor. I had already seen several houses, but none of them were. I lived in Alameda, and I was coming out to the tunnel, from the tunnel, and waiting at the traffic light to drive towards Walnut Creek. And I'm sitting here in my car, and suddenly there were big truck in front of me. And this big truck in big letters said, "Make a difference." And me in my car, I said, yes, I will make a difference. And immediately after, there was another big truck saying, "And we will deliver it to you." And I thought, wow, okay, wow, this is definitely a message, but what is it about? And then later on that day, I found this home, which when I look through the window, I can see the sky, trees, the mountains. I can see animals going through, and it's my paradise on earth, my sanctuary. So that's it. So, you know, I would say for all of us, it's a matter of opening our heart, our ears, and our eyes to see how the Holy Spirit is trying to communicate with us. And now we come in our journey this afternoon, we come to the beginning and end of all things, which is divine love. I have learned that the most important thing in life is not how many university degrees you have, how much mind, knowledge you have, how much power and material possessions you accumulate. I learned that the most important thing of all is learning how to love ourselves and love others, and how to develop a loving and personal relationship with God. God love is there all the time, and all we need to do is open our hearts and begin to receive this love. And now there is this beautiful quote that I truly love. It's called, the quote is, "A gift of true love is always God's love to you that you give to another." And I'm going to share with you the rose story. It's a real thing that happened. Years ago, I lived in Bogota, Colombia. And in our Eckankar events, we have the picture of our teacher, which we do not worship, but we love. And we always have flowers next to that photo as, for love. And at the end of the events, the flowers are distributed between the people who are there. And this good day, I received a red rose. Okay, I was so happy. And I was thinking, okay, when I get home, I can put it here, I can put it there. On the way out, I found my friend Belsi. And on impulse, I gave Belsi the rose. And she was very happy to get it. So Belsi goes on a bus, boarded the bus to go home. And in Colombia at that time, people who were down on their luck sometimes came on the buses selling small things or telling a story to receive some money. On this particular occasion, and this is how Belsi told me, this is what happened. When Belsi is on the back of the bus going home, this man boards the bus. This man, you can see that is really down on his luck, and he is looking angry. And he tells his story. His story is that he used to have a farm out on the countryside. He had his family, he had his crops. And one bad day, he had to run for his life with his youngest child. And the rest of the family were killed because they were caught in the fight between the guerrillas and the army. So this man got left nothing, only his little daughter. He arrives to Bogota, which is an inhospitable big city when you don't know anybody and you don't know how to earn your living. So this is all he can do, he go on the buses and tell his story. And as he walks through the bus with an extended hand for people to give him money, because they were sorry and because they were intimidated by this man, he's coming nearer to where Belsi is, and Belsi is thinking, oh my goodness, I don't have money to give this man. He's going to be angry with me. So the inner guidance tells Belsi, give him the rose. She says, no, he's going to be angry with me. Give him the rose. So when the man comes by her, she gives him the rose. And at that instant, the man's demeanor changed completely, and his face softens, and tears come to his eyes, and he says, now I know that God loves me. And so this is how when we receive this love from the divine and we share it with other people with unconditional love, is like the most wonderful thing. So let's come to the next slide. Something my teacher has told us is that all religions are of God. That God created different religions so that people with different states of consciousness can find their own way to the divine. And he has a wonderful definition of what a true religion or a true spiritual path is. He says, it's one that does good in the world. It tries to find ways to help people be themselves. It does not try to shape people to be what we think they should be. The sign of a true spiritual path is that it helps the people grow to become more godlike, capable of more love and mercy for themselves and others. So, yeah. So you will say, or maybe think, well, what about Mariu? What about you have challenges being a student of Eckankar? And I say, yes, I do. However, nowadays it's easier for me because I have a spiritual understanding, like Sarah was saying to us at the beginning, that the spiritual understanding is very important because it helps us to know about ourselves, other people, God, and the place we have in the universe. So Harold Clem tells us that divine love leads directly to spiritual freedom, that the entire aim of life is to find that freedom. And with freedom is very important. He also says that though the earth may shake and tremble, the person who loves God above all else will endure with peace of heart and mind. And now I would like to share with you briefly my story that has to do with this, with enduring and with finding trust. And I find that it may be true for you as well, that it at times of the greatest challenge that we may find a spiritual, very important truth. I had a son whose name was Manuel. He died when he was 24 in a very tragic and sudden manner. In the midst of my agony, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't be in one place. It was real agony. And then out of my consciousness came this sentence for me. It said, no matter what, everything is going to be okay. So it didn't feel like that at that time, but I kept repeating that as a mantra, and eventually it was true. And because I was able to survive the greatest traumatic event in my life, I have been able to develop a great trust in the divine. And no matter what, for me, means even if the roof caves in, you have nothing to stand on. Everything around you collapses. If you are embraced by the love of God, you are going to be okay. Because God loves us and it looks after us. It doesn't matter what the world looks like, or it doesn't matter whether we are going through a bad patch. The truth remains that we were created with love, and we're just basically learning the important things that we need to learn. So, okay, conclusion. Are we good or bad? And to me, is humanity good or bad? To me, it really means, are we good or bad? And my answer is, we are neither good nor bad. All of us are simply children of God in the process of growing spiritually through this life and other lives. God's love is always with us, despite how difficult our lives may be. Thank you for coming with me on this journey. Let me see, and I think this is it. This is it, guys. Let me see how I can come back to you. Okay, here I am. And now I am ready. If you have any questions, I am very happy to answer.
Thank you, Mariu, for a rich sharing. And now it is time for the attendees to ask questions of Mariu or to make comments from their own experience. So,
And Sarah, can I just suggest that people use the reactions button to raise their hand like I'm doing right now? That makes it easier for us to call on them because it moves them up to the top of the screen for us.
yes, that's a very good idea. Otherwise, it's hard to see. So, yes, thank you. Thank you, Will. Yes. So, any questions for Mariu or comments on what she's said? It's
Funny. Go ahead.
Hi, Mariu. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was so illuminating, and I love the fact that we have so many different presentations throughout this program. I'm always looking forward to how different each person's presentation is. My question is there any, according to your beliefs, is there any value in knowing what your past lives were?
Okay, that's a good question, Channing. What I have learned is that some people trying to do kind of go to therapists and have past life recall and all of that. What my teacher says is that what is relevant is what is helpful to you today. You know, if you don't understand why you have a pattern, or you don't understand why you have this family karma that is so heavy, if you ask, and you may have a dream, or you may gain an understanding of why it is that this person that you love actually hates you. Who knows, you know, maybe in the past something happened between you and there is an account to be settled. Does that answer your question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So Mariu, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Sarah. You say that it's important to purify the emotions and the mind.
Yeah.
So how does Eckankar how do people who follow Eckankar do this? How do you purify your mind and your emotions?
Okay, that's a very good question. And you know, with the spiritual truth, I am always getting deeper and understanding more. How I purify my emotions is that, for example, one of my spiritual practices is singing a mantra, which is the Hu song, a very ancient name for God. And it goes like, He. I use that mantra, which is very healing. So I think that by having a spiritual practice, by contemplation, by looking at yourself and holding very high values, it's important for us to get to know ourselves and to gradually use the law of surrender. You know, if you are a very angry person, maybe you can become aware of it, be more careful, and gradually you put that in the hands of God. And I find that purifying my mind and my emotions, which I have done gradually through the years, and I'm still doing it, actually creates a lot of space inside of me because I'm not so stressed. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So Kristin Powell, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mariu. This was a really wonderful presentation, and I especially enjoyed your personal stories. Mine is maybe the same as Channing's question. I'm not sure. I might have missed something that you answered there about past lives. But I'm curious if you'd be willing to share if you yourself have done some past life regression work or have found that to be useful on the spiritual journey, maybe through colleagues or others that share your beliefs in your spiritual community. Or is it just something that, you know, reincarnation is the principle and the idea, and some people may or may not choose to delve into what happened in the past?
Okay, Kristin. So you're asking me what personal experience I have of that, and I will try to be brief. When I visited Granada in Spain, I went to the Alhambra. It used to be a fortress, and it was the last standing fortress of the Moors before the Christians took over. And there is a very big door, like this thick. I go in there and I touch the door and I have like electricity shaking me. And I thought, wow, this is very strange. There is a tower where there is a bell, and there is a plaque in there saying, on the 1st of January, 1492, the Catholic king and queen came into Granada. And I read that and I started crying like crazy. And I understood that I had been there at that time, and what happened had affected my life. And I think I was a Moor at that time. And I just felt real grief about that situation. And I have other recalls about that, ways in which I like to dress and things that I like. So that's one of the experiences I have had.
Thank you. Reza, go ahead. You have your hand.
Yes. Thank you, Mario. It was wonderful to hear your experiences and your teachings. And my concern was similar to Ms. Sarah, but could you elaborate on prayers with your teachers? Do you go to a center, do you go every week, every month, and then how do you pray? Once a day, or any kind of could you elaborate a bit on that, please?
I understand. When you become a member of Eckankar, there is a very well developed study program. And we study all the time. We read the discourses, we contemplate, and there are spiritual exercises that we practice. Like one of them is singing the hymn, and there are other spiritual exercises. And basically, my way of prayer is when I sing the hymn, I can sing the hymn 10, 15 minutes. And when I sing the hymn with my heart, what I am saying is, I love you. I am addressing the divine, and I love you. And through the years that I have been practicing this and putting my attention on the spiritual and listening to my teacher, going to seminars, I have found that for me at this moment, what is really, really important is to hold my attention on the divine, and this is something that everybody can do, like for example, at night, I the representation of the divine for me is the Mahanta, is a high soul, but it's only a representation. I'm not praying to him. The high souls on earth are people that come here to be channels of love from God for us. So if we have the image of someone we love, that image can help us open our heart. So at night I say, thank you so much. This was a wonderful day. I give thanks and I dedicate myself, I consecrate myself to the divine, and I do the same thing in the morning. And whatever practice you have, Reza, I think it's very important for us to do it with a very sincere heart. And in my experience, for me, developing a personal and loving relationship with the divine, whatever you feel that is, and kind of what I do is I talk to it all the time, like, hey, and when I began to do this, I was going like, hey, is anybody there? Because each of us are children of the divine. We are in permanent contact with the essence of God, because we are godlike. God created us, so we are children of God, and we can communicate with that. And the more than we talk to that principle, the more that it begins to answer you, like it did to me when I found my house in Rossmoor. I think, Ruth, you wanted to ask?
I just wanted to say that this is a most beautiful and most moving experience that you shared with us. And the trust that you have in your belief system and the way it supports you and helps you. It's obvious to me to see how really strong that can help you feel, and how you show this in the way that I see you moving and talking around. And it's just very beautiful. Thank you for coming and telling us about it.
Thank you, Ruth. I want to say something, maybe the last, and is that, my teacher says that it's important for us to discover truth over and over again, because every time we look at it, we can understand more. And something that became clearer to me recently is that, because I was thinking, okay, how does the love of God comes to me? And then I realized that the way it comes is by the love that other people give to me, because we are all channels for divine love. And the more pure our intentions and our emotions and mind are, the more that we are channels for this powerful and beautiful love.
Thank you, Mariu. What a good way to end up talking about love of the divine. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for listening.
So our second speaker is Reverend Kristin Powell, representing Unity Church. Reverend Powell is an ordained Unity minister who is delighted to serve as lead minister in the vibrant and loving Unity of Walnut Creek community since 2017. She is also the treasurer of the Unity West Central Regional Board and is involved in the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County and Pleasant Hill clergy. Kristin is thrilled to have recently attended the 130th anniversary gathering of the Parliament of World Religions in her hometown of Chicago. In 2003, Kristin founded Unity Rising to offer spiritual retreats and sojourns in divine nature, and currently offers nature immersion. Previously, Kristin served as a supervisor at Silent Unity, Unity's international prayer ministry, and a senior minister at Unity of Columbia in Missouri. She was host of the Soul Stream on Unity Online Radio from 2013 to 2016. Kristin joyfully shares her home with her wife, Brinley Rita, her mother, Jan, and their dogs, Dakota and Samson. She loves to be outdoors swimming, beaching, hiking, or biking. A very active lady. Welcome, Kristin.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be with you. And as you were reading my bio, I thought, wow, that's probably way more information than any of you ever wanted.
That's right. Just right.
Anyway, I'm thrilled to be with you. We have a lot of folks from Rossmoor that come to Unity of Columbia. I was listening to the bio, Unity of Walnut Creek, and I have friends there too. So I feel like even though I don't know all of you, we are friends and colleagues and part of a larger community together. So it really is an honor to be with you. And I love your big question. This was a really good one. And so I just obviously want to dive right into that. And as Sarah mentioned, I just attended the Parliament of World Religions. And I'm wondering if some of you did too. Are there folks here that attended that? I know Will did. I ran into Will.
Sunshine attended.
Who did? Sunshine.
Sunshine.
Wonderful. Yeah, so it was an amazing experience, as you can imagine. And one of the sessions I attended was a 4-hour one. It was a double session called Is Racism Fake News? And it was led by some of my Unity colleagues. And the facilitator opened the session by saying that somebody had come up to her before the session and say, why does it take 4 hours to just say no? Racism is not fake news. And I kind of felt the same way about today's question. It's not going to take me 20 minutes to say both. Yes, humanity is good and selfish. That's the short answer to the question. But of course, there is a longer answer, and that's what I'd like to share with you now. So here's the longer one. Let's start with humanity's selfishness. Yes, I would say humanity is selfish. We see it everywhere, right? We see it in our political leaders in all parties who give up their integrity. They change their perspective to pander to votes. In order to keep their positions of power. We see it in our celebrities and fashions and marketing, peddling the prosperity myth that more is better, regardless of whatever the environmental consequences may be. We see it in corporate and individual greed. We might see it in our own spouses, our own children, our friends. And if we're really self-aware, we'll see it when we look in the mirror. We tend to look out for number one. Yet, I don't know if that's such a terrible thing in and of itself. Selfless service, on the other hand, is something that is a part, or selflessness, this idea is in all of our religions. We all have this form of selflessness that is really about service, sacred service. It's called seva, as you probably know, by Hindus and Sikhs. And that brings me back to the parliament, where the Sikhs were the largest representatives of any religion. And so many of them were there because they came in seva, in sacred service. They came to serve us lunch in a community kitchen. It's a service called Langar. Some of you are probably familiar with it. And they were serving the 7,000 plus attendees every day. The Sikhs came in that spirit, and that group flew from London, paid all their own expenses, did not attend the parliament because they were there to serve. Now, the Sikhs that I encountered there were bright and shiny and thrilled to be of service. And that's the way it works when we are really in that kind of essence of selflessness in service, the kind of service that fills our cup, in other words. So the idea behind selfless service is that we put our needs before others. But there is an issue with that. Let's take mothers, for example, classic example. Mothers are often considered selfless, and often it can be at the cost of a mother's own health and well-being if it is taken too far. My sister's an example of that. She has 3 adult children now, and 2 of them are in their late 20s and still live at home because they have autism. My sister also works. She also will take my mom when I'm in situations where I can't have my mom here long-term, who has also been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And there are times that my sister's sciatica is so bad she can hardly move, but she'll say, well, I don't have time to go to the doctor. So let me say that my sister could use a little more selfishness, and I don't think that would be such a bad thing. There has to be a sense of self in service. There has to be a sense of fulfillment for the giver. Otherwise, there really isn't authenticity or a true sense of generosity in the service that we render. So the idea of the selfless mother or the selfless person can often be taken too far, and then it becomes just an exercise in overextending and people-pleasing that leads to exhaustion and maybe even disease or dis-ease. So I believe there's a form of selfishness that doesn't discount our self-worth while still making meaningful contributions to others. I want to tell you a story that happened to me. Well, I'm going to start from the beginning. When I was a kid, I loved rabbits. And I always wanted a pet rabbit. I never had one, but my best friend's brother caught a wild rabbit and they kept him for a pet. And I spent a lot of time over there. They named him Virgil. And I loved Virgil so much that when I held him, I was afraid I might hurt him, squeeze him too hard because I would hug him so tight. And then I saw for the first time jackrabbits, which, you know, I lived in the Midwest, so that was something, you know, that was in lands far beyond, but they were like these mystical creatures to me, and just, they brought me so much joy just to think about him. In 2010, I took a sabbatical from my ministry. I was pretty exhausted, and it was hard for me to keep up with all the needs, and I worked a ridiculous amount of hours. So I went on this spiritual retreat in the Inyo Mountains here in California, and it was the first time I got to see a jackrabbit hop across the desert, and it was so joyful and so thrilling for me. So while I was on this same retreat, I decided one morning at dawn, for the dawn, to drive up to the ancient bristlecone pine trees. And so it was a long, windy, dark drive to get up to the top to be able to watch the sunrise over these ancient beings that are the bristlecone pines. And while I was driving up in the dark, something darted out onto the road, and I heard that dreaded thud. So I pulled over and I walked back to find to my horror that I had run over and killed a beloved jackrabbit. I blessed his lifeless body, and I drove slowly from there toward the dawning light at the top of the mountain, feeling really sad, really heavy-hearted, and also really puzzled. Why would this being that I loved so much be killed by me, by my own vehicle? So a day or so later, I was still on this retreat, and found myself lying across this rock in the desert sun. I started to think, I feel like a sacrifice. And then I actually sat up in an insight, realizing, oh my gosh, that's what happened. That jackrabbit had sacrificed his life for me so that I would wake up and see what I was doing. I was working in a mode of self-sacrifice rather than in a mode of honor. And I realized, how could I really honor my people if I was sacrificing myself? So we have to include ourselves in the sacredness of our service, or our service will just be sacrificial, which can lead to being resentful. Sacred service is about honoring all life, including our own. The relationship author and speaker Shasta Nelson discovered that when women start caring for themselves, it doesn't lead to the selfishness they fear. It's on the contrary, that women who engage in the greatest amount of self-care are the ones who are the least likely to grab, judge, condemn, compete, hoard, and devalue. She says healthy women show up in healthy relationships. So yes, humanity is selfish, for worse and for better, depending on the viewpoint. And humanity is good. Yes, good by nature. In fact, so good, humanity is God by nature. In Genesis, the first book of the Bible, we're told we're made in the image and the likeness of God. Mariu kind of pointed to this in her talk. And after human beings were created in Genesis, they were called good. So let's not get caught up in the whole creation versus evolution idea here. I believe maybe creation, or I do believe creation was an impetus from the divine intelligence of the universe to set our evolution into motion to become Homo sapien, human. And the idea is that basic blueprint of humanity was made and called good. Still, for us, it seems to be too good to be true. So a whole religion sprung up based on the idea that we're born of original sin. An all-knowing creator made a flawed creation. That is totally a head scratcher for me. I believe from the beginning we came not from original sin, but blessing, born of original virtue. All you have to do is look into the eyes of a newborn baby to have this truth affirmed. I mean, how many of us have seen a baby and said, oh, you poor thing, you're a mistake, you're a miserable sinner. Humanity is good by nature. Still, we don't always show up in our goodness. in part, I believe, at the fault of our religious teachings. We are what we believe we are, and then we act accordingly. If we're taught we're flawed by nature and we believe it, we'll act that way. While human beings think and do amazing, beautiful, creative, innovative things in the world, human beings also think and do evil, corrupt, and horrible things. Often the same humans will do both in the same lifetime. So when we behave badly, does that make us bad in our essence? No. If your child is acting up, do you decide they're a bad human being? Humans are unalterably good in our essence because we are in truth divine in our essence, made in the image and likeness of our source. We just don't always act that way because we don't believe it. So this begs the question of evil. It seems humans are capable of bringing a lot of evil into the world. And so for that, I want to show you a quote from Unity's co-founder, Charles Fillmore. Let's see, can you all see that okay? You can, okay. He says, evil is a parasite. It has no permanent life of itself. Its whole existence depends on the life it borrows from its parent. And when its connection with the parent is severed, nothing remains. So evil isn't something that in and of itself exists. It's this idea that it has a temporal existence. And that temporal existence comes with the gift we have as human beings of free will. While we may choose to act in unkind ways and even let evil hitch a ride with us as kind of a parasite, it can't live unless we keep feeding it. In other words, we feed it with our thoughts and our ideas and our beliefs. So this man-made creation comes out of a mistaken understanding of how to get our needs met. The old idea of hurting people hurt. It becomes an underlying and sometimes tragic and dangerous mistaken identity. Remembering our true identity then, reclaiming the goodness of humanity is the answer, I think, to a lot of our worldly problems. It won't make us more egoic or more selfish to claim this because we're talking about this deeper underlying understanding of goodness, a deep understanding of the heart and the soul, our divine essence. In Hinduism, there's a story, and this is a short version, that reveals to me a lot about our humanity and the impulse to look outside of ourselves for just about everything. You might have heard this story. Brahma and the gods are gathered together, and they're trying to decide where to bury human divinity on earth so that humans will have a harder time finding it. The gods suggest that divinity could be hidden on the highest mountains. But Brahma goes, no, they're going to figure out how to climb the highest mountains and they're going to find it. And then some of the gods say, well, how about in the deepest oceans? Nah, they're going to figure out how to dive into the deepest places and they're going to find it. So they go through a few more ideas, and exhausted with the options, the gods just throw up their hands and they say, I don't know. And Brahma says, oh, wait, I have an idea. I know where we'll hide humanity's divinity, right there within them. They'll never think to look there. And it turns out Brahma was right. Our Western culture persists in a kind of Augustine-influenced Christian theology that humans are corrupt by nature, that we're born of original sin, and that the only way we can be absolved is by accepting Jesus saves us through his crucifixion and resurrection. But Jesus himself taught this long before he was murdered. He taught about the innate goodness of humanity. He reminded his followers of a Hebrew scripture. Did I not say ye are gods? He told us you are the light of the world. In the Gospel of Thomas, one of the Gnostic Gospels that includes teachings believed to be directed toward the closest disciples, the closest followers of Jesus, because they were maybe considered to be a little more advanced teachings. He says, when you come to know yourselves, then you will become known. and you will realize it is you who are the sons of the living Father. Let me see, I can show you this quote if it's easier to read it. Oh, sorry. You're all at the bottom of my screen now. Here we go. I'm moving you all around. Okay, there we go. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father, or my addition, the daughters of the living Mother, or the children of the living God, however you wish to say it. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. So some of these teachings are a little tough, but it is that directness, I think, that can be helpful for us to really get this idea of innate divinity and goodness. So are we this? Are we good or are we selfish? Both. I really believe it's both, but it's both in the sense that when we wake up to the fact that we are this innate goodness, that we have this innate goodness in us, that we are made in this image and likeness of divine love, then we want to contribute to others' well-being. We naturally will contribute to others' spiritual awakening as we too evolve in our understanding. So it's a both and, for sure, to the answer to your big question that's posed by this group, and one that I think we're continuously evolving into. So thanks for your attention, and let's open it up for questions.
Thank you, Kristin. Some rich gems to think about here. So this is a time for those of you to ask questions of Kristin, or to make comments from your own experience. And I want to just say that I appreciate your emphasis on free will. You know, we can choose, you know, at any particular moment whether to be selfish or selfless. So free will seems to be a real foundational principle of living, and if we know that, we can use it. So anybody else have any comments or questions? Elizabeth Bradner, unmute yourself, Elizabeth. Can you unmute yourself, Elizabeth? She's not able to do that. Let's see if she can do that. Elizabeth, why don't you keep working on it? And who else had their hand up? I don't see anymore.
Mariu had her hand up.
Okay, Mariu, go ahead.
Kristin, I just want to thank you for a wonderful presentation. And I agree with you. I think we are in essential good, obviously. Because if we are children of God, then we have to be good. We just have to go through all of these things to develop and grow spiritually. But thank you so much. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Reza.
Thank you, Ms. Kristin, for the enlightenment. My question is, which I share with my faith, is when you come to know yourself, is there any elaboration on your part, how you explore to others how to get to know themselves, any disciplines, any inputs?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. That's the path, isn't it?
Yes.
I think that's a big part of our spiritual journey, is really to reveal more and more of who we are in essence. I mean, there is both our unique soul expression upon the earth, right? So how you express, how I express is going to be a little bit different, our own contributions and all those things that backgrounds and things that make us who we are, ancestry and so on. So I think that's an important part of the soul's expression. But beneath that, this idea of this innate divinity, this idea of innate goodness, I think is a constant revelation on our journey. And we can do that through practices such as meditation, prayer, being in community. I think asking these questions, pondering things, not only in our minds intellectually, but really taking them into our hearts and holding a space for that. I love too in Mariu's presentation where she told that story about how she's driving down the highway and she sees this truck that says, make a difference. And then she sees another truck that says, we will deliver it to you. And it's like, that is being on the spiritual journey, right? We stay awake and alert and open to the messages of life and take them into a deeper space inside of us. And then she did that. And she talked about then from there, what came from that was poetry and a new experience. So I think it's about that. It's about heart-centered living. And how do we get there? Every one of us is going to have a different answer. But reflection, maybe it's scripture or other sacred writings, maybe it's poetry or writing poetry. So I think for each of us to ask that question of ourselves and answer it, and then practice in such a way. And for all of us, we probably have had different practices over the years. And after a while, it's like, that practice feels a little stale, but I'm being introduced, or I'm deepening that practice, or I'm being introduced to something new. So it can be anything. It could be movement. For me personally, it's meditation, yoga, movement, being in nature, being in spiritual community, an inquiry, process of inquiry, whether that be through writing and journaling or holding a question in meditation or discussion. All of those help kind of shake loose the insights that help me on the journey.
I like that phrase, shake loose the insights.
Yeah.
Shake loose the insights. Thank you. Channing, go ahead.
And Elizabeth has her, is unmuted as well.
Yes.
Oh, right,
I
thank
think
you.
it worked now. I found this quote yesterday that I really liked, which is, service is the rent we pay for our space on earth.
Say that again, Elizabeth.
Service is the rent we pay for our service on our space on earth.
Ah, yes. Thank you.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
But I'm really glad to hear that today that we're getting away from the concept of sin and of sinfulness. I don't feel that I'm a sinful person. I've made mistakes and I've not been negligent, but I don't feel like I'm aware of sin.
My understanding is sin comes from an archery term that just means missing the mark.
Yes.
And so it's, yes, of course, we're going to make mistakes. That's a part of our learning curve. But that doesn't make our nature mistaken. And that's the difference. And it's a really important difference.
Well said. Channing, go ahead.
Yes, Kristin, we always say to our speakers, don't concentrate on your faith. Don't just talk about what your faith is. But could you give us a brief background of what unity is and where it came from and who Charles Fillmore is?
Sure. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were students of Emma Curtis Hopkins, who came out of Christian Science. And at that time, there was a convergence of a lot of exciting at the turn of the century. So unity is about 130-ish years old. I guess it was 1889 was kind of the marker of the beginning of us. So I guess I don't know if that's the right math, but somewhere in there. Anyway, so there was a lot of teaching that came out of faith healing. Essentially, it was healing their bodies through faith. And Myrtle Fillmore really is the key founder of Unity. Her husband, Charles, watched what she was doing, and then he was skeptical and sort of scientific and intellectual in his approach, but he began to practice what she was practicing, and he too experienced physical healing. So it was out of that, by using meditation and affirmation, affirmative prayer and meditation, that they experienced healing. And from there, the unity movement grew. And over time, initially it was more like a life philosophy, and they weren't planning necessarily to have a big church movement or ministries, but people began to practice through their publications and join them in prayer. And then they wanted more. And so all around the country, they were in Kansas City. So people were saying, hey, we want credentialed leaders. We want you to train people so that they can come and start a study group here. And so that's kind of how the ministries sprouted from there. So that's a little bit of a window into it. And I would say we're considered New Thought. So the Parliament of World Religions considers New Thought its own religion, and New Thought includes unity, centers for spiritual living, agape, divine science, religious science. There's a bunch of them, but unity is the largest of the different groups that are under the New Thought umbrella. So I hope that gives you an overview.
Thank you so much. It's hard sometimes to know a little bit more about each religion as we're having speakers, but we're having a speaker from Center for Spiritual Living next month.
Perfect.
Okay, Sunshine, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Kristin, and it was a wonderful presentation, both you and Mariu. I wanted to thank you for something I just learned. I didn't realize that unity came from Christian Science. That I find that really a surprise. So 2 questions, just because you just said that. One is relative. Do you know just a little more why unity did separate from Christian Science? And 2, since we were both at the Parliament of World Religions, I would be interested to hear just if you attended anything else that might relate to this question we have today.
Okay, so the first question, Mary Baker Eddy was the founder of Christian Science, and Emma Curtis Hopkins was one of her students who became a teacher, and she taught many of the folks who went on to create their own branches of New Thought and similar teachings. And Mary Baker Eddy stuck with one path, and there wasn't really agreement necessarily with the others. So there are other influences in unity, like theosophy and transcendentalism, and the Fillmores studied Eastern religion as well. So there was a lot of kind of a mix of different modalities and influences. I would say, number one, their master teacher, and still today ours, is Jesus. We follow the teachings of Jesus. It's just that we don't always line up with how Christianity is interpreted. So I don't call us Christian. I call us I say we follow the teachings of Jesus. We honor all paths to the one, and we honor the individual paths, and we also draw from other master teachers. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit of Mary Baker Eddy. The second part of your question was, did I attend anything at the Parliament that addressed the question today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, yeah, so much. I would say just in general, like just a big swath of general terms of the experience at the Parliament of World Religion, to me was a lot about the goodness of humanity. That's mostly what I heard and what I experienced, about how we can come together, how there's common good. I did not experience any divisiveness or ideas of, because we have different theologies. I think naturally the people who come to Parliament of World Religions are invested in the idea of the common good that we all share, and the fact that by coming together, we can do good things in the world. So, like, for example, seeing everybody come together and do the dances of universal peace on the terrace was one of those ways. It was just really beautiful. So I would say, just in general terms, I heard about how good humanity is in our essence over and over in different ways.
Thank you.
Ruth, go ahead.
Before I speak, I think Valerie would like to say something.
Oh, yes, she put something in the chat. Valerie, do you want to say what you put in the chat, or shall we just read it?
You can read it.
Okay, she said, so far, we have been discussing self-awareness and personal growth. Are humans to help bring this awareness to others? If yes, how? So how can we bring this awareness of goodness to others?
You know, I think it was Gandhi who said, you know, he was getting on a train in South Africa and a reporter yelled, Gandhi, what's your message? And he said, my message is my life.
Ah,
You know, I think that's it, right? It's how we live our lives by example. It's how we show up. It's how we talk. It's what we, you know, the words we speak matter, the things we do matter, how we treat others matters. So it's just how we move about the planet and are in relationship to each other, I think, that speaks louder than anything else, and that brings that kind of self-awareness. There is a natural attraction, I think, for us to be around goodness and kindness and love. And, you know, so when we are that, we attract that. We attract others and inspire others to be that as well. So I really think how we live is probably the greatest awakener for others.
well
And
said.
does the power of intention, does the power of your own intention that goodness be discovered by others, does that have any effect?
I believe it absolutely does, because the power of intention is prayer in action. The power of intention is how we hold what it is that we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Because with intention, we have a sense of purpose behind it.
Yes.
So it's not just that I show up this way, but I'm showing up this way on purpose because it matters. And I know it matters, and it makes me feel better, and it makes the people I'm with feel better. And it makes a sense of that I'm having a contribution and that I'm plugged into a sense of purpose. So I do think intention matters a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth?
So I've been asking the same question Valerie's asking. I'm going to put it in a framework of knowing that the goodness is within every human being, and it's there, and we have free will. And how to spark that goodness in other people seems to be the challenge that we face today. So many people are in a prison of fear created from which causes anger and hostility. And how do we break through that prison window and let them feel hopeful and help to spark that goodness within them? I think I don't think that anybody has an answer to that, but I think that's our challenge, to live spiritually in this world. And I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that or not.
Well, I would just say, Ruth, I really appreciate the thought and the question, and more than that, the passion behind it, the intention behind it. You know, I think we each are on our own journey to decide that moment by moment. You know, how do I show up in this moment? How do I, you know, respond to this angry person that's before me, let's say, for example, or the person who's demonstrating road rage on the highway? You know, do we respond in kind, or do we respond from a place of compassion? You know, and that is one of the ways I think we can't change anybody. We can't do it for them. We can't fix anyone. That's not what we're about. If we trust that every person has the wisdom within them and has the journey that they're on, it can help us relax a little bit in the quest to save the world, you know? And at the same time, we can just be present with what is before us and take those opportunities. In how we respond can make a big difference, I think.
Seems like we need to carry around a bouquet of roses to hand out.
There you go. That's full circle.
Yeah.
I think, Mariu, you had your hand up.
You're muted, Mariu. You're muted.
What I was going to say, Kristin said it beautifully, so I don't need to add anything. You know, we each decide when and how we want to take the next step, and I agree. You know, we can be kind to each other, and when we were talking about purification of emotions and mind, it's exactly that. We don't have to answer anger with anger, and this kind of thing. And we can be, if you want a model, we can be there with love, and it's up to people to pick it up or not, and when they do it.
Thank you. Robert, you have your hand up.
Just on the question of how do we spread this, one of the tenets that I have of interfaith, and this is an interfaith gathering, and also reflecting on what Kristin said, is that there are other paths to the top, is that everybody I see is a brother or sister, because they're children of God that I haven't met yet. And I like to sort of approach others with that idea, and also the sense of the divinity within them, because as I've listened to the speakers throughout the year, many say that God lives within each of us. So in front of us is a brother or sister with a fragment of God in them, and that just helps me have the confidence to open up and have a real conversation with that person. I don't know, maybe Kristin, you'd like to comment on that?
Well, you said it beautifully. I'm not sure I can add anything more to that. That is a part of knowing yourself. That was it Reza said earlier about how to know yourself. I mean, I think you just gave a perfect example of that there is an insight in knowing, an understanding in you that recognizes, oh, there's divinity in the person who I'm interacting with. And because you know this now, you can respond in a different way that then contributes to all of us knowing more of that. So yeah, I don't have anything more to add to your beautiful words.
Thank you. Channing.
Robert, were you here in February, Robert, for our speakers?
Who were the speakers?
Well, the one I want to refer to is Susan Shannon. She's a chaplain who worked at San Quentin prison on death row.
I think so.
And she told many stories of transformation and rehabilitation of prisoners who had committed the most heinous crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a film on YouTube that you could watch. It's called Q Ball. Q stands for Quentin. San Quentin has a lot of not resuscitation. What's the right word? Rehabilitation programs, and the prisoners can choose whatever they want. And basketball is number one. That's what a lot of the inmates want to join. And what that does, and Susan points out that, because of our culture and our society, as children are growing up, they are either disconnected or connected. And when you are connected as a young child, let's say you have loving parents and, no sibling rivalry, no violence in the neighborhood, no drugs going on. If you have connection, then, and even just one person can be connected, like a foster parent. And that could guide a person, out of darkness. So she talks about disconnection is the cause of most of the crimes. And so the purpose of bringing people back in prison is to show compassion, because the spark of God within is longing for that connection to another human being.
It's true. Yes, this is true.
And so it may seem really, really hard. It may seem really hard to reach, but she's actually a Buddhist. And she really is very disciplined in her spiritual practice. And she talks about many of the men who are in this film. So I welcome you to watch that on YouTube, Cue Ball. Look for Cue Ball, the film, and that's the full movie. But I think that that's a perfect example of taking people who have been disconnected all their lives, and they've sought out a way to belong with gangs and, you know, being very lost. And so there's a way back. And I think that's a good clue for us as to how to be with other people, you know, not to react to what they are saying or doing, but to understand. And as someone has, I think, Mariu talked about forgiveness. And that's hard, but, you know, we have to work at that.
It's so interesting that if one person can see the holiness in a child when they're young and care for them, it could change their whole lives.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so when we're seeing adults who are, you know, acting very badly, what I look at is I look at their inner child. I look at the woundedness, the trauma that they've experienced, and they've never worked that out. So, you know, that's what I see. And I try to be as kind as possible, but I also believe in boundaries. You know, I'm not there to be walked over. So.
Yes. Thank you. Sunshine, you're going to be the last voice. We're almost done. Go ahead.
Well, with that, I think I'll just, what moved me from our conversation of many is one refers back to you, Sarah, too, on free will choice. And I think that back to the literal statement of our question, good or selfish. And I think selfish is a choice of to be selfish or selfless is an act of generosity of the self. When Kristin and I think Mariu, when we, or what Channing was referring to even in the prison, you can, whatever you're feeling for, if you can get out of judgment, choose to get out of judgment and choose to choose forgiveness. I think that's the path we're all working on to reach that goodness that we all do believe is original blessing, as Matthew Fox says.
Thank you. Well, thank so much, Mariu Arzayus and Reverend Kristin Powell for your presentations. It's just such rich gems that we hold in our hearts as we go forth into our everyday lives. And next time we have one more session, one more big question session in October. And then we take a break until next year, where we're going to gather as a committee, a big questions committee, and see if we can figure out what the big question is going to be. Next time, we're going to hear from Andreas Pilhoop, representing the Hope Lutheran Church. He's been with us today and several days. So, Mr. Pilhoop, we look forward to seeing you next month. And then also Doug Meyer from the Center for Spiritual Living will be joining us next time. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your richness, for your sharing. And Mariu and Kristin Powell, thank you so much for your energy and your just excellent attention to our question.
And Sarah?
Yes, sir.
I had put a couple links into the chat room for participants. One, we are having a report back tonight from members of the Bay Area that went to the Parliament at 7 o'clock, and the Zoom link is in the chat, or you can find it on our events page at interfaithccc.org. And Thursday is International Day of Peace, and we have a special theater piece with Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb called Megiddo on Sacred Ground. And it's going to be at First Christian Church of Concord, Disciples of Christ, 3039 Willow Pass Road at 7 o'clock. Tickets are online. We'd love to have you there in person if possible. If you're ill and you can't make it, there will be a Zoom link for folks that got tickets and aren't able to make it in person. And please bring a mask since we'll be in person and we don't want to share anything with other folks.
Thank you, Will. So sounds like good things to be aware of. Okay, until next time, we will have blessings on you and bless others, and we go forth from here.
Thank you.
Will.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Will.